I showed up at my mother's wedding to my ex-husband and exposed their affair in front of everyone. Yeah, you heard that right. My mother, my ex-husband, their wedding. I know how that sounds. Like some twisted plot from a bad movie, right? This is my life. This actually happened to me. And the worst part? I'm the one who paid for their hotel rooms while they were sneaking around behind my back. My name is Paige, and I live in Seattle. Or I used to, anyway. On paper, my life looked pretty normal. Good job in marketing, nice apartment, solid marriage. I had one of those lives people scroll past on social media without a second thought. Nothing special, nothing broken, just fine. But underneath all that fine, something rotten was growing, and I had no idea. I'm not the kind of person who makes scenes. I don't yell in restaurants or air my dirty laundry on Facebook. I keep my head down, work hard, treat people right. So when everything exploded, when I finally saw the truth about what they'd been doing, everyone was shocked that quiet, nice Paige would do something so public, so dramatic. But here's what I learned. There's a difference between keeping the peace will destroy you inside. And I was done. What happened at that wedding wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back my voice, my story, my life. It was about making sure that when people remembered that day, they'd remember the truth, not whatever fairy tale version those two were trying to sell. This is going to be a long story. And honestly, I'll need someone to see it through with. If you want to know how I went from devastated daughter and betrayed wife to the woman who crashed her own mother's wedding, you can follow along here. That way, you won't miss what happens next. Because trust me, it only gets messier. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment everything started to crumble. I just didn't know it at the time. It was a Tuesday night, about a year and a half ago. Adam came home late. Again, this had been happening for weeks. But that nothing felt different. He smelled like, not mine, something sweeter, heavy, kind of scent that clings to your clothes after long day. I asked from the couch, trying to sound casual, even though my heart was already picking up speed. He barely looked at me, just mumbled something about a work dinner and headed straight for the shower. That's when I noticed his phone lighting up on the kitchen counter. Text after text. I'd never been the type to snoop. I trusted him, but something in my gut twisted. I walked over. The screen was face up, and I could see the preview of the messages without even unlocking it. They were from someone safe, just the letter, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Tonight was..." He doesn't suspect anything? My hands started shaking. Who was he? Was Adam talking to this person about me? Was this woman asking if I suspected I heard the shower turn off. Quickly, I stepped away from the phone, my mind racing. When Adam came out, towel around his waist, hair dripping, I tried to act normal. I tried to be the trusting wife I'd always been. Who's D? The question just fell out of my mouth. He froze. For just a second, maybe less. His face went completely blank, and he recovered. Too quickly, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What? Your phone. Someone named D has been texting. Oh. He laughed, but it sounded forced. That's just Derek from accounting. We've been working on the quarterly reports. Derek. A man's name. That made sense, right? Except the messages didn't sound like they were about quarterly reports. Why would Derek ask if he suspected anything? Derek uses a lot of heart emojis in his work texts, I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Adam's jaw tightened. You're going through my phone now. I wasn't going through anything. It was sitting right there, lighting up like a Christmas tree. Paige, I'm tired. Can we not do this tonight? That's when I knew. Not the details, not the who or the how long, but I knew. My husband was lying to me, and the way he turned it around, making me feel guilty for asking a simple question, that was the real crack. The first chip in the foundation I thought was solid. He grabbed his phone and walked into the bedroom, closing the door harder than necessary. I sat there on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to understand what was happening. My marriage, my safe, predictable marriage, suddenly felt like it was built on sand. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Adam was distant, always on his phone, finding reasons to leave the house. Gym, work emergency, drinks with the guys. Every excuse was plausible enough on its own, but together they painted a picture I didn't want to see. I started paying attention, and that's when I noticed something else, something that should have been impossible to miss. My mother had also become unavailable. Mom and I talked almost every day. We'd have coffee on weekends. She'd come over for dinner at least once a week. She was my person, you know? My dad died when I was 21, and after that, We got even closer. I helped her with bills, made sure she was okay. She was part of my life, our life. But suddenly, she was busy. Always, can't make dinner this week, honey. I have plans. What plans? Just plans. I'm allowed to have a life, aren't I? The defensiveness was new. Mom had never been defensive with me before. One night, about 3 months into Adam's weird behavior, I called her late. I was having a panic attack, convinced my marriage was falling apart, and I needed my mother. She was the only person I could talk to about this without feeling judged. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then I texted, "Mom, please. I really need you right now." 20 minutes later, she finally responded. "In bed. Talk tomorrow." Oh, but here's the thing. I heard something in the background when I called the second time, right before it went to voicemail. A voice. A man's voice. Low, muffled, but definitely there. Mom had been single for 10 years. She'd gone on maybe 2 dates in all that time and told me about both of them. If she was seeing someone now, why wouldn't she tell me? Why the secrecy? Unless... No. I pushed the thought away as soon as it formed. That was insane. Impossible. Sick. The thought had planted itself and I couldn't dig it out. A week later, Adam came home and dropped the bomb that would split my life into before and after. Paige, I want a divorce, just like that. No warning, no discussion. He stood in our living room in his pockets and destroyed everything. What? Why? I'm not happy. Haven't been for a while. Then let's fix it. We can do counseling, I've met someone else. The room tilted. I grabbed the back of the couch to steady myself. Who? That doesn't matter. It matters to me. Who is she? I'm not discussing this. I just want a clean break. No drama. Drama? He was asking me not to make a scene while he ripped my heart out. How long? My voice came out as a whisper. He looked away. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. How long have you been cheating on me? I'm done with this conversation. My lawyer will contact you. And he left. Just walked out of our apartment, out of our marriage, like I was nothing. I called my mother, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. She came over within the hour, held me while I fell apart, told me Adam was an idiot and I deserved so much better. "You'll get through this, baby," she whispered, stroking my hair. "I promise. You're strong. You'll survive this." And I believed her. Because she was my mom, because I trusted her. I had no idea she'd been sleeping with my husband for the past. The divorce went through fast. Too fast. Adam didn't fight for anything, didn't ask for the apartment, the furniture, the savings we'd built together. He just signed the papers and disappeared from my life like smoke. At the time, I thought maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he knew what he'd done was wrong, and this was his way of making amends. Looking back, I realized he was just eager to move on, to start his new life with my mother. But I didn't know that yet. Not for another 6 months. Those 6 months were the darkest of my life. I barely functioned. Work became mechanical. I'd show up, do the bare minimum, go home. My apartment felt too big, too quiet. Everything reminded me of Adam. The coffee maker he'd used every morning, the dent in the couch where he'd sit to watch TV, even the smell of the place. It still held traces of his cologne. Mom was there constantly. She'd bring food, clean my apartment, force me to shower when I'd been in the same pajamas for 3 days. She was the only thing keeping me together. "You're going to be okay," she'd say, holding my hand. "This pain won't last forever, I promise." And I believed her. I clung to those words like a lifeline. But there were moments, small, strange moments, where something felt off. Like the time I caught her smiling at her phone, then quickly hiding it when she saw me looking, or how she'd get anxious if I called her after 8 at night, or the way she suddenly had money for things, new clothes, dinners at nice restaurants, even though I knew her Social Security barely covered rent. "Did you get a raise or something?" I asked once, half joking. She stiffened. "I'm just being more careful with my money, that's all." But I paid her rent. I knew exactly how much money she had. Then, about 4 months after the divorce, she started pulling away. Our daily calls became every other day, then twice a week, then once a week. When I'd ask to see her, she'd have excuses. "I'm busy. I have plans. Can we do next week instead?" "What's going on with you?" I finally asked, frustrated. "Are you mad at me or something?" "Course not, honey. I have things happening in my life. Personal things. What personal things? Mom, talk to me. Not everything is about you, Paige. Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Sharp, almost cruel. I felt like she'd slap. I didn't say it was. I'm just worried about you. Well, don't be. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. And she hung up. I stared at my phone, completely confused. This wasn't my mother. The woman who'd raised me, who'd been my best friend, who'd held me through the worst months of my life, that woman wouldn't talk to me like this. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I started with Adam's social media. He'd blocked me on everything, which wasn't surprising, but his accounts weren't private, so I created a fake profile, a random woman named Jessica Martin with a generic photo, and followed him. His posts were sparse, a few pictures of Seattle skyline, some food photos, nothing personal. But then I noticed something in the comments. Someone with the initials DH kept commenting little inside jokes. Heart emojis. Kind of casual intimacy that only comes from being close to someone. DH Diane Harper. My mother. No. I was being paranoid. Mom didn't even really use social media. She barely knew how to post a photo. But I clicked on the profile anyway, and there she was. My mother. Her account, which had been dormant for years, was suddenly active. Photos from restaurants I recognized, expensive places downtown, pictures of her in new outfits. One photo of a lake at sunset with the caption, "Best view, best company." The comments on that photo included one from Adam's account. "Can't wait for next time." My hands went numb. I scrolled back through her posts, looking for anything concrete. I found it. A photo from 3 weeks ago. It was just a picture of 2 wine glasses on a table, clinking together. The caption, "Celebrating new beginnings." In the reflection of the wine glass, barely visible but definitely there, was a man's face. Adam's face. I dropped my phone. It clattered onto my kitchen floor, screen cracking, but I didn't care. My mother. My mother was seeing Adam. No, not just seeing him. Based on the timeline of the posts. Based on the frequency of their interactions. Based on everything. They'd been together since right after the divorce. Maybe even before. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Wave after wave of nausea, my body rejecting this information like poison. When there was nothing left in my stomach, I sat on the cold tile floor and tried to think. Okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was seeing connections that weren't there because I was still hurt, still broken, but I wasn't wrong. Deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. I needed proof. Real, undeniable. The next morning, I called a private investigator. His name was Derek. Ironically, the same name Adam had lied about when I'd asked about the texts. Derek's office was small and smelled like old coffee, but his reputation was solid. "I need to know if my ex-husband is in a relationship with my mother," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Derek didn't even blink. "How long have you suspected?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe. But I only really started putting it together. I'll need their info. Names, addresses, workplaces. Photos if you have them." I gave him everything. "How long will it take?" "Give me 2 weeks. If there's something to find, I'll find it." Those 2 weeks were torture. I went through the motions of living, work, home, sleep, repeat. But inside I was screaming. I didn't confront Mom, didn't call her, didn't text her. If I was right, if she really was betraying me in the worst way imaginable, I needed evidence first. I needed to be sure. Derek called me on day 13. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I was already sitting, but I gripped the edge of my desk anyway. "They're together," he said. "Have been for approximately 2 years." 2 years. That meant they started the affair a year before your divorce, Derek continued. "I have text messages, emails, credit card receipts, hotel bookings under your mother's name, dinner reservations. They weren't even that careful about hiding it. How did you get all this?" "Your mother's email password was your late father's name and birth year. Not exactly Fort Knox. The text messages came from Adam's phone records. He uses cloud backup, and I have a guy who can access that. Everything's legal? Don't worry. And admissible in court if you want to go that route." Court. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. "Can you send me everything?" "Already compiled it. Sending the full report now. There's one more thing." My stomach dropped. How could there be more? "What?" "The hotel stays, the dinners, the trips. A lot of them were paid for with credit cards linked to accounts in your mother's name. But the deposits into those accounts, they came from you." What do you mean they came from me? The money you were sending your mother for rent and expenses, she was using it to fund the affair. You were essentially paying for them to cheat on you. The room spun. I thought I might pass out. Ms. Sinclair? You there? Yeah, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to. No, it's. Took a shaky breath. Exactly what I need. You, Derek. I hung up and opened the email he'd just sent. The evidence was overwhelming. Screenshots of text messages dating back 2 years. I love you. Can't wait to see you again. Paige is starting to ask questions. Photos of them together at restaurants, at hotels, at a beach resort I recognized from Mom's social media. In some photos, they were holding hands. In others, kissing. Living a whole secret life while I was falling apart. One email from Mom to Adam, dated 3 months after my divorce, made me see red. I feel guilty about Paige sometimes. She's so broken. I remember that we deserve happiness. She'll find someone else eventually. She always bounces back. I felt guilty about Paige sometimes. My own mother. Feeling guilty. Sometimes. Like I was an inconvenience. A minor obstacle to her happiness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to her apartment and confront her right there. But I didn't. Because in that moment, sitting in my apartment with 2 years of lies and betrayal spread across my laptop screen, something inside me changed. Grief, the shock, the devastation, it all crystallized into something cold and sharp. They'd taken everything, my marriage, my trust, my sense of safety in the world. They'd made me doubt my own instincts, made me feel crazy for suspecting, but I was right. And they were going to pay for what they'd done. I opened a new document and started, because if my mother and my ex-husband thought they were going to ride off into the sunset together while I suffered in silence, they had another thing coming. I was done being the victim. It was time to take back my power. 3 months after Derek handed me the evidence, I received the wedding invitation. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sorting through mail without really paying it. Bills, junk, a catalog I never, and then a thick cream envelope with my name written. My hands knew before they started shaking before I even opened. The invitation was expensive cardstock with gold embossing. The kind of invitation you'd expect from a couple who wanted everyone to know this was a serious, legitimate union, not a relationship built on lies and betrayal. Diane Harper and Adam Sinclair request the pleasure of your company at their wedding ceremony. I read it 3 times. Then I ran to the bathroom and vomited. My mother was marrying my ex-husband, and she'd had the audacity, the sheer, breathtaking audacity to invite me. When the initial shock wore off, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cautious. She knew. She had to know what this call was about. I didn't yell, didn't scream. I kept my voice steady, almost pleasant, as I asked her how she could possibly do this. Her response was worse than I could have imagined. She sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I was the problem. She told me about their deep connection, about how love can't be controlled. She actually said the words, "The heart wants what it wants," like she was quoting a Pinterest board instead of describing how she destroyed her daughter's life. Then she said she hoped I could give them my blessing. My blessing. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Before the rage I'd been carefully containing for months exploded and ruined everything I was planning. Because I was planning something big. But first, I needed to see them. Needed to watch them interact, see if they had any idea that I knew the truth. If they suspected I'd hired an investigator, if they had any clue what was coming. I found out through my cousin Haley, the only family member who'd stayed loyal to me, that Mom and Adam were having an engagement party. Small gathering, mostly Adam's coworkers and a few of Mom's friends. Haley wasn't invited, but she knew the date and location. "You're not actually thinking of going, are you?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. I told her I needed to see them one more time before I made my final decision. She didn't understand, but she gave me the information anyway. The party was at an upscale wine bar in Bellevue, the kind of place with low lighting and jazz music, where people spoke in hushed tones and laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I wore simple black, nothing memorable, and arrived early enough to get a table in the corner where I could see everything but remain mostly invisible. They arrived 20 minutes later, and seeing them together in person, not just in photos from Derek's room, felt like being stabbed fresh. Adam had his hand on her lower back. That proprietary touch. Mom was wearing a dress I'd never seen, probably bought with money I'd given her, and she looked happy. Actually genuinely happy. That's what hurt the most. She wasn't conflicted or guilty. She was radiant. They made the rounds, greeting guests, accepting congratulations. I watched Adam introduce Mom to his colleagues, saw how comfortable they were together. This wasn't new for them. They'd been playing house for 2 years. They had their routines down, their inside jokes, their casual, intimate. Then something happened that changed. One of Adam's coworkers, a woman I vaguely recognized from company events I'd attended back when I was his wife, pulled him aside. They spoke quietly, but I was close enough to catch fragments. The woman looked uncomfortable, kept glancing at Mom. I strained to hear over the ambient noise of the bar. The woman was asking Adam if he thought this was a good idea, if he'd really thought through the implications. She mentioned something about the company's reputation, about how the circumstances of their relationship were raising eyebrows. Adam's response made my blood run cold. He told her not to worry, said that by the time they got married, enough time would have passed that people would forget the details, said that Paige, me, was dealing with it fine, that I'd moved on, that there was no drama. Like, I'd just accepted this and moved on with my life. But it was what he said next that gave me the ammunition I needed. He mentioned that they were planning to buy a house together, that Mom was selling her apartment, the apartment I'd been paying rent on, and they were pooling resources for something bigger. He laughed and said something about finally having access to real money now that they didn't have to hide the relationship. Real money. Mom's apartment sale would generate maybe $40,000. That wasn't enough for a down payment on the kind of house Adam was describing, which meant they were planning to use marital assets. Money from my divorce settlement that Adam had so graciously let me. Except now, I understood why he'd been so generous, because he was planning to get it back through Mom. They were going to use my money to build their life together. I sat there, wine glass frozen halfway to my lips, as the full scope of their plan became clear. This wasn't just about them falling in love. This was calculated, strategic. Adam had wanted out of our marriage anyway. I could see that now. And Mom had provided the perfect exit strategy. Someone to move on to, someone who would make him look like the victim of circumstance rather than just another cheating husband. And Mom, she'd landed a younger man with a good job and the promise of financial security. Everything she'd lost when Dad died. I was just collateral damage in their grand plan. I left the bar before they noticed me, but my racing. That conversation I'd overheard, Adam admitting they were trying to minimize drama, that they expected people to forget, that I'd supposedly moved on, it revealed their biggest weakness. They were underestimated. They thought I was broken, compliant, too devastated to fight back. They thought they could send me a wedding invitation and I'd either ignore it or maybe send a bitter text that they could laugh about together. They had no idea I'd spent the last 3 months compiling evidence. They didn't know about Derek, about the emails and text messages and bank statements I had saved on a secure drive. They thought they'd gotten away with it. And that false sense of security was going to be their downfall. Over the next few weeks, I played the part they expected. I didn't call Mom, didn't reach out to Adam, didn't make any waves. I let them believe I was hiding at home, nursing my wounds, too weak to confront them. But behind the scenes, I was building something. I contacted a tech-savvy friend of Haley's, a guy named Marcus who did audio-visual work for corporate events. I explained what I needed, and he didn't even hesitate. He was disgusted by what they'd done and eager to help. I organized all of Derek's evidence into a clear, damning timeline. Text messages with dates, photos with location tags, bank statements showing Mom using my money for hotel rooms. Everything arranged in chronological order, impossible to misunderstand or dismiss. I practiced what I'd say, wrote it out, revised it, practiced in front of the mirror until my voice didn't shake. This wasn't going to be an emotional breakdown. It was going to be a calculated exposure. And I went shopping. The dress I chose was red. Not subtle, not forgettable. The kind of red that demanded attention. I wanted every eye in that room on me when I walked in. I wanted there to be no doubt about who was speaking, who was taking control of the narrative. I was done being invisible in my own story. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks from when I received weeks that I used to prepare for the most immense of my life, because that's what it would be. I couldn't go in there angry and scream. That would make me look unstable. Would let them jealous ex who couldn't move on. No, I needed to be calm, collected, devastating in my I needed to walk into that ceremony and destroy them with nothing but the night before the wedding, I barely slept. I kept going over the plan, checking for weaknesses, making sure everything was in place. Marcus confirmed he'd be there early to scope out the venue's audio-visual system. Haley confirmed she'd be sitting near the front, ready to support me if things went wrong. Everything was ready. And as I lay in bed, Staring at the sea, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost 2 years. Power. They'd taken so much from me. My marriage, my mother, my sense of safety. They'd made me question reality, made me feel crazy for suspecting. But tomorrow, I was taking it all back. Tomorrow, everyone would know exactly who Diane and Adam really were, and there would be no coming back from it. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with absolute clarity. No more tears, no more shaking hands or racing heart. Just cold, focused determination. I'd spent the night before going through Derek's evidence one last time, making sure everything was orderly on the flash drive. The timeline was airtight. Text messages from 2 years ago showing the affair started while I was still married. Photos of them at hotels, at restaurants, at a weekend getaway they'd taken while I was visiting my aunt in California. A trip Mom had encouraged me to take, saying I needed time away. Now I understood why. Bank statements showing the trail of my money funding their secret relationship. Receipts for lingerie purchased on Mom's credit card, the card I'd added her to as an authorized user on my account to help her build credit. She'd used my own credit line to buy lingerie for her affair with my husband. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was devastating. I took my time getting ready. Did my hair in loose waves, makeup subtle but polished. The red dress fit perfect, sophisticated, not desperate. I looked like someone who had her life together. Someone in control. That was important. I couldn't look like the wounded victim. I needed to look like someone who'd risen above and was now delivering justice. Marcus texted me at noon. I'm in. Venue system is basic, but it'll work. Just give me the signal when you're ready. Haley texted shortly after. I'm here, sitting third row. There are maybe 60. Mom's side of the family is pretty sparse. I think most of them know something's off, but don't know what. You sure you want to do this? I was sure. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I timed my arrival for 1:55, right when everyone would be seated, right when the ceremony was about to start. I drove to the venue in Bellevue, an upscale event space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, the kind of place that cost a fortune to rent. I wondered briefly who was paying for all this, then realized I probably already knew. Mom had sold her apartment the week before. My rent money liquidated and poured into this farce of a wedding. I parked far from the entrance, took 3 deep breaths, and checked my reflection one last. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the broken, sobbing mess I'd been a year ago. She looked fierce. Ready. I grabbed my clutch, the flash drive tucked safely inside, and walked toward my mother's wedding. The lobby was empty, everyone already seated inside. I could hear music, classical and romantic. My stomach twisted, but I pushed the feeling down. I waited in the shadows near the entrance, listening to the ceremony begin. The officiant's voice carried through the door, welcoming everyone, talking about love and commitment, and the journey Diane and Adam were about to begin together. The journey was suffocating. Then I heard it. The words I'd been waiting for. The officiant asked if anyone had any objections, if anyone knew of any reason why these two should not be married. The traditional pause followed, that moment where everyone sits in awkward silence because no one ever actually objects at weddings. Except today, someone would. I pushed open the doors. The sound echoed through the room, loud enough that everyone turned. 60 pairs of eyes landed on me, standing in the doorway in my red dress, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the windows behind me. I saw Adam's face go white, saw Mom's hands grip her bouquet so tight the flowers started to crumble, saw Haley in the third row, her expression a mix of pride and terror. I walked down the aisle, my heels clicking on the marble floor, each step perfectly measured, unhurried. I wasn't running in like a scorned woman having a breakdown. I was walking in like someone who had every right to be there. When I reached the front, I stopped a few feet from the altar and looked at them. Really looked at them. Mom was wearing ivory, not quite white, because even she knew that would be too much. The dress probably cost thousands. Her makeup was flawless, her hair styled in an elegant updo. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Adam was in a navy suit, perfectly tailored. He'd grown a beard since I last saw him, and it made him look older, distinguished, like the kind of man who deserved a fresh start with a mature, sophisticated woman. The illusion was about to shatter. The officiant, an older man who clearly had no idea what he'd walked into, stared at me and I smiled. Not a warm smile, a smile that said I knew exactly what I was doing. Then I spoke, my voice carrying clearly through the silent. I told them I had an objection. Several, actually. Mom tried to cut me off, her voice sharp and desperate. She wanted me to leave, to stop making a scene, but I wasn't going anywhere. And this was just the beginning. I turned to face the guests, making eye contact with as many of them as I could. I saw curiosity, and on a few faces, the ones who'd clearly heard rumors, dawning understanding. I told them who I was. Not just Paige, not just a guest who'd wandered in off the street, the daughter. I was the ex-wife. I was the person this happy couple had built their relationship on top of. I watched the information sink in, saw jaws drop, saw people lean toward each other to whisper. The energy in the room shifted from celebratory to uncomfortable in seconds. Mom tried to control the narrative, tried to frame this as me being unable to let go. She told everyone I was making a scene, that I was upset about things that had happened long ago. But I'd prepared for this. I didn't get angry, didn't raise my voice. I simply stated facts. I told them about the timeline, about how Adam had asked for a divorce without explanation, about how my mother had consoled me through the worst months of my life while sleeping with the man who destroyed me. I told them about the investigation, about the evidence I'd found proving the affair started while I was still married. And then I told them about the money. That's when I saw several people in the crowd sit up straighter. Money always gets people's attention. I explained how I'd supported my mother financially for years, how I'd paid her rent, helped with her bills, made sure she was comfortable after Dad died, how she'd taken that money, my money, and used it to fund hotel rooms and dinners and romantic getaways with my husband. I watched Adam's colleagues exchange glances. This wasn't just a messy personal situation anymore. This was fraud, manipulation, financial abuse. Mom's face had gone from pale to red. She was shaking, whether from rage or fear I couldn't tell. Adam took a step toward me, his hand raised like he was going to physically remove me from the ceremony. I didn't, just looked at him with the same calm expression I'd maintained since walking in. That's when Marcus, positioned near the venue's control booth, caught my eye. I gave him the smallest nod, the large screen behind the altar. The one they'd probably planned to use for a slideshow of romantic photos during the reception flickered to life. And every single piece of evidence I'd compiled over the last 3 months appeared for everyone to see. Text messages between Adam and Mom dated 2 years ago. Messages where they talked about hiding the affair, about keeping me in the dark, about how convenient it was that I was so trusting. Photos of them together at hotels, timestamps proving they were taken while I was still married to Adam. Bank statements showing transactions from my accounts being used to pay for their affair. One particularly damning email from Mom to Adam, written just after my divorce, where she said she felt guilty sometimes, but that they deserved happiness too. The room erupted, not in celebration, in chaos. People were standing, pointing at the screen, talking over each other. Adam's boss, I recognized him from company events, was staring at the evidence with his mouth open. Several of Mom's friends had their hands over their mouths in shock. Haley was crying, but she was also filming everything on her phone. Smart girl. I stood there in the center of it all, completely calm, and delivered my final statement. I told them this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about making sure that when people looked at this marriage, they knew exactly what it was built on: lies, betrayal, and stolen money. I told them they were free to continue with the ceremony if they want, but they should know that everyone would remember this day as a celebration of love, but as the day the truth. Then I turned to Mom and Adam and said one last thing. I told them to enjoy their marriage, to live with the knowledge that everyone knew who they really were, that their relationship would always be tainted by how it started, and that I hoped it was worth it. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked back down the aisle, my head high, my steps steady. Behind me, I heard shouting, crying, the sound of people leaving, chairs scraping against the floor. I'd done what I came to do. The truth was out, and there was no putting it back. I made it to my car before the adrenaline wore off. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I sat there in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd just done. Behind me, through the venue's glass walls, I could see chaos. People streaming out of the ceremony, some looking angry, others just shocked. A group of older women, Mom's friends from her book club, stood in a tight circle, clearly arguing about something. My phone started buzzing. Text after text. Haley. Oh my God, that was incredible. Are you okay? My Aunt Susan. Paige, what is happening? Someone just told me you interrupted Diane's wedding. Unknown number. This is Patricia from Adam's office. I just want you to know that what you did today was brave. I never liked how he handled your divorce. I didn't respond to any of them. Just sat there, watching the aftermath of the bomb I'd dropped. Then I saw them, Mom and Adam, standing near the entrance with the officiant. From this distance, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told the story. Adam was gesturing angrily. Mom had her face in her hands. The officiant looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. They were trying to salvage this, trying to convince the remaining guests to stay, to continue the ceremony like nothing had happened. But it wasn't working. More people were leaving. Adam's boss walked past them without a word, his face set in a hard line. A woman I recognized as one of Mom's longtime friends stopped in front of her, said something short and sharp, then walked away. I watched my mother crumble. Part of me, a very small part, felt bad. That was still my mom, even after everything. The woman who'd raised me, who'd been there for every birthday and graduation and heartbreak before this one. But then I remembered her email. I feel guilty about Paige sometimes. The sympathy evaporated. I started my car and drove home, my phone still buzzing nonstop. I turned it off. Whatever was happening back there, whatever fallout was coming, I'd deal with it tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. The next morning, I woke up to 73 missed calls and over 100 text messages. Most were from family members who'd heard what happened and wanted details. Some were supportive, others were angry, telling me I'd embarrassed the family, that I should have handled this privately. There were 3 voicemails from Mom. I deleted them without listening. 2 voicemails from Adam. Those I listened to. The first was angry. He told me I'd ruined everything, that I was vindictive and pathetic, that he was going to sue me for defamation. The second, left an hour later, was different, quieter. He said I'd misunderstood everything, that the evidence I showed was taken out of context, that if I'd just talked to him first, we could have worked this out privately. Too little. Too late. But it was the text from Haley that really caught my... You need to see this. Check Mom's Facebook. I opened Facebook for the first time in months and went to Mom's page. She'd posted a long statement early this morning, clearly written in damage control mode. It talked about how love happens unexpectedly, how she and Adam had tried to fight their feelings out of respect, how they'd waited until after the divorce to officially start their relationship. It was all lies, of course, but it was written in that sympathetic tone that made them sound like victims of circumstance rather than people who deliberately destroyed someone they claimed to love. The comment section was a war zone. Half the people were supportive, talking about how you can't help who you love, how life is complicated. The other half were calling her out, especially after several people who'd been at the wedding shared what they'd seen on that screen. One comment from my cousin Melissa made me smile. "Diane, I was there yesterday. I saw the evidence. Stop lying." But what really interested me was a comment from someone I didn't recognize, a woman named Jennifer Mills. "Diane, you need to tell Paige the truth about the investment property. She deserves to know what you and Adam did with her money." Investment property? I screenshot the comment and texted Haley. "Who is Jennifer Mills and what investment property?" She called me immediately. Jennifer was Adam's coworker, someone who'd been at the engagement party I'd crashed. She'd overheard Adam and Mom talking about buying property together. Not just a house to live in, but rental properties they were planning to flip. Using money from Mom's apartment sale, money that came from rent I'd been paying for years. "There's more," Haley said, her voice tight. "Jennifer said she overheard them talking about taking out a loan in your mom's name. Something about using the properties as collateral, but I don't understand all the financial details. She said it sounded sketchy." My stomach dropped. A loan in Mom's name. Mom, who I'd helped build credit for. Mom, who was on my credit card as an authorized user. Mom, who had access to financial information about me because I'd trusted her completely. "I need to check something," I told Haley. "I'll call you back." I pulled up my credit report, something I hadn't looked at in months. There was no reason to. I paid my bills on time, never carried a balance, was financially responsible. But there it was. A hard inquiry from 3 months ago. Then another one from 6 weeks ago. Both from mortgage companies I'd never contacted. Someone had been applying for loans using my information, called my bank immediately, was transferred 3 times, finally got someone who could pull up detailed activity on my accounts. "Ma'am, I'm showing that you're listed as a co-signer on a loan application that was submitted 6 weeks ago. The application was approved for $250,000. My vision blurred. I never signed anything. The signature on file matches what we have in our system. And the application was submitted with your social security number and current employment information. Mom had forged my signature, used my credit, my income, my entire financial identity to secure a loan for her and Adam's investment scheme. I need to report this as fraud, I said, my voice shaking. Of course. I'll transfer you to our fraud department immediately. The next 3 hours were a nightmare of phone calls and paperwork. Fraud reports, police reports, disputes with credit bureaus. The loan hadn't been fully processed yet. They were still in the approval stages. But the fact that it had gotten this far was terrifying. If I hadn't found out, if I hadn't checked my credit report, they would have taken out a $250,000 loan in my name. And when they inevitably couldn't make the payments on their investment properties, I would have been liable. They weren't just betrayers. They were criminals. That evening, Haley sent me a link to a private Facebook group, one of those neighborhood gossip groups that people join to complain about noise and lost pets. Someone had posted about the wedding disaster. The post had over 200 comments, and it was spreading to other local groups. People were calling Adam and Mom scammers, con artists. Someone had dug up public records showing Mom's apartment sale and was speculating about where the money went. The court of public opinion was brutal, and it was just getting started. My phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Paige Sinclair? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Yes? This is Margaret Chen from Whitmore & Associates. I'm the director of human resources at Adam's company. I'm calling to let you know that we've launched an internal investigation into Mr. Sinclair's conduct. Several employees have come forward with concerns about his ethics, particularly regarding the circumstances you revealed at the wedding yesterday. I sat up straighter. What kind of concerns? I can't go into details, but I wanted you to know that we take these matters seriously. We find that Mr. Sinclair has violated company policy or engaged in fraudulent activity. There will be consequences. I also wanted to thank you for bringing this information to light, though I imagine that wasn't your intention. Is he being fired? I can't comment on personnel matters, but I can tell you that he's been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. After she hung up, I sat in stunned silence. Adam was being investigated at work. Mom was being ostracized socially. The loan fraud was being reported to authorities. I'd hoped would happen. Consequences, justice was actually happening. But there was still one piece missing. I needed to know why. Had Mom done this? Was it really just about falling? Is there something deeper? Some thought about Jennifer's comment about investment properties, about the forged loan about how quickly Mom had jumped from consoling me through my divorce to planning her own wedding. This wasn't just a woman who'd fallen for the wrong man. This was someone who'd seen an opportunity and taken it, regardless of who got hurt. I pulled out my laptop and started digging through Mom's social, going back years, looking for any hint of what her real motivation was. And then I found it. A post from 3 years ago, shortly after Dad's 10th death. Mom had written about how hard it was being a widow, how she felt invisible in a world that valued couples, how she'd worked so hard to rebuild her life, but still felt like she was barely surviving. Then, in the comments, someone had asked if she'd ever consider dating again. Her response, I don't know. I'd need someone stable, someone who could provide security. At my age, romance is nice, but practicality matters more. Someone stable, someone who could provide security. Practicality over romance. That's what Adam was to her. Not a love story, an opportunity. He had a good job, a stable income, and he was vulnerable after our marriage fell apart. Mom had seen a chance to secure her future, and she'd taken it. The fact that it meant destroying her own daughter was just collateral damage. And Adam? He'd wanted out of our marriage anyway. He was bored, maybe he'd fallen out of love, or maybe he just wanted something. Mom had offered him an easy exit and a built-in replacement. Someone older, more independent, someone who wouldn't ask as much of him emotionally. They'd used each other. And they'd used me. But their alliance was built on selfishness and deception. And those foundations never hold. I could already see the cracks forming. Adam being investigated at work, losing his income and his reputation. Mom being cut off from her social circle, isolated and desperate. The loan fraud investigation that would tie them both up in legal problems for months or years. They thought they were so clever. Thought they could have their happy ending at my expense. But they'd underestimated one crucial thing. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. I wasn't going to let them rewrite history or play the victims. I was going to make sure everyone knew and I was going to watch their carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of reality. The wedding disaster was just the beginning. Now came the real consequences. The wedding that never finished became the talk of Seattle within 48 hours. Not just whispers among family and friends, actual news. A local blogger who specialized in relationship drama got wind of the story and wrote a piece titled "Wedding Crasher Exposes Mother's Affair with Her Ex-Husband." It went viral, 30,000 shares in 2 days. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, podcasters, people wanting to interview me for their YouTube channels about toxic family dynamics. I ignored all of them, but the attention did something I hadn't anticipated. It brought more people forward. 3 women contacted me through Facebook. All of them had worked with Adam at various points in his career. All of them had stories. One woman, Christina, said Adam had pursued her aggressively when she was an intern, despite being married to me at the time. She'd reported him to HR, but nothing came of it because she had no proof and he was a senior manager. Another woman, Bethany, said Adam had a reputation at his previous company for being inappropriate with younger female employees. She'd left that job partially because of his behavior. The third woman, Sophie, didn't have a story about Adam. She had a story about my mother. Sophie had been Mom's neighbor 5 years ago, before Mom moved to the apartment I'd been paying rent on. She said Mom had been dating someone back then. A widower named Robert, who had money from a successful business he'd sold. They'd been serious, talking about marriage. Then Robert got sick, cancer, like my father. And suddenly, Mom wasn't interested anymore. She broke up with him while he was going through chemotherapy, telling Sophie that she couldn't handle watching another man die, that she needed to protect herself emotionally. Robert died 6 months later. Alone. Sophie's message ended with, "Your mother isn't the victim she pretends to be. She's a survivor, but not in a good way. She survives by taking what she needs from people and moving on when they can't give her anymore." I read that message 5 times, my hands shaking. Mom had to find someone who could provide for her, emotionally, financially, whatever she needed, and take from them until there was nothing left to then move on. She'd done it to Robert. She was doing it to Adam. And she'd done it to me for years, bleeding me dry financially while giving nothing real in return except performative motherhood. I'd been a resource to her, not a daughter, a resource. The realization should have destroyed me. Instead, it clarified everything. This wasn't about me being unlovable or easy to betray. This was about Mom being fundamentally broken in a way that made her incapable of real love. She only understood transactions. And Adam had been the same, using me for stability and companionship until something that seemed better came along. They deserved each other, but they weren't going to get each other. Not for long, anyway, because the cracks I'd noticed were becoming chasms. Haley called me a week after the wedding disaster with an update. She'd been monitoring Mom's social media and had noticed something interesting. Mom and Adam had both gone silent online. No posts, no updates, nothing. But their friends were talking, and what they were saying painted a picture of a relationship imploding in real time. Someone commented on Mom's last post asking if the wedding ever happened. Another person said they'd seen Adam moving boxes out of the house they'd been renting together. "I think they're splitting up," Haley said. Or at least, things are really bad. I wasn't surprised. Everything that had held them together, the secrecy, the thrill of the forbidden, the fantasy of their future, had been destroyed. Now they were just 2 people who'd ruined their lives for each other, stuck with the consequences. Adam had been suspended from work pending the investigation. Without his income, he couldn't afford the lifestyle he'd promised Mom. The investment property scheme had fallen apart once the fraud investigation began. They had nothing except each other and a mountain of debt. And Mom, she was completely isolated. Her friends had abandoned her. Her family wanted nothing to do with her. She had no job, no income, and no support system. They'd burned everything down for their grand romance, and now they were standing in the ashes, realizing what they'd lost. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more thing I needed to do. One final piece of closure. The fraud investigation had uncovered something interesting. When the police looked into the forged loan application, they found that Mom had done this before. Not to me, to my father before he died. She'd taken out credit cards in his name while he was sick, run them up to their limits, and never told him. When he died, those debts became part of his estate. I'd helped Mom settle Dad's affairs without knowing that half those debts were from her spending, not his medical bills. I'd paid off my father's debts, Debts my mother had created. The detective handling the case called me personally to explain. He said they had enough evidence to press charges for identity theft and fraud, but they needed my cooperation. "She's your mother," he said carefully. "I understand if you don't want to pursue this." I thought about Dad, about how hard he'd worked his whole life, about how Mom had sat by his hospital bed, telling him not to worry about money while secretly racking up debt. I thought about how she'd done the same thing to me, used my trust, my love, my financial stability to fund her own agenda. "Press charges," I said. There was a long pause. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." 3 weeks later, Mom was arrested. The charges were extensive: identity theft, fraud, forgery. The prosecutors were taking it seriously because of the pattern of behavior, because she'd targeted both her dying husband and her own daughter. Adam wasn't charged. He hadn't been directly involved in the financial fraud, but his name was all over the case. His reputation was finished. The company let him go quietly, and he moved back to his hometown in Montana, tail between his legs. Mom's arraignment was public record. I didn't attend, but Haley did. She said Mom looked small, diminished, nothing like the confident woman who'd been planning her wedding just a month before. Mom's lawyer tried to reach out to me, said Mom wanted to apologize, wanted to make things right, wanted to explain herself. I didn't respond, because here's what I'd learned. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some betrayals are too deep, too calculated, too destructive to move past. Mom hadn't made a mistake. She'd made a series of choices over and over again that prioritized herself at the expense of everyone around her. She'd done it to Robert, to Dad, to me, and she'd do it again if given the chance. The woman who raised me, who I'd loved unconditionally, who I'd trusted with everything. That woman never really existed. She'd been a performance, a role Mom played to get what she needed. And I was done being her audience. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 months out. The prosecutor said with my testimony and the evidence, they could get a conviction. Mom would likely face jail time. Part of me felt sick about it. Sending your own mother to jail isn't something anyone wants to do, but the stronger part of me, the part that had been forged in the fire of this, knew it was necessary. Not for revenge, for accountability. Mom had spent her whole life and facing no consequences. Someone had to stop the cycle. Someone had to say enough. If her own daughter wouldn't do it, who would? The night before I was scheduled to give my deposition, I finally listened to Mom's voicemails. All 17 of them that had accumulated over the past month. The first few were angry, accusing me of ruining her life, of being vindictive and cruel, of not understanding real love. The middle ones were bargaining, saying she'd made mistakes, but we could work through this as a family, that she'd go to therapy, that she'd make amends. The last one, left just yesterday, was different. Her voice was small, broken. She said she understood why said she'd been a terrible mother, a terrible person. Said she didn't expect forgiveness, but wanted me to know that she was sorry. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said she finally understood how Dad must have felt, betrayed by the person he trusted most, realizing too late that the life he thought he had was a lie. She said she hoped I'd be happy, that I'd find real love someday with someone who deserved me, that I'd build a life better than anything she'd ever given me. And then she said goodbye. Not see you later or talk to you soon. Just goodbye. It sounded final. I called Haley immediately. "Can you do me a favor? Can you check on Mom?" She left me a weird voicemail, and I need to know she's okay. Haley drove to Mom's apartment, called me from outside the door. "She's fine. I can hear her moving around inside. She's alive, Paige." I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. "You still care about her," Haley said softly. "I care that she's alive. That's different from caring about her." But was it? I wasn't sure anymore. The deposition the next day was brutal. 3 hours of recounting every betrayal, every lie, every moment I discovered another piece of the truth. The prosecutor was thorough, building an airtight case. When it was over, he told me I'd been an excellent witness, that we had everything we needed for a conviction. I should have felt victorious, vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Paige?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "This is David Chen. I'm Adam's brother." I almost hung up, but something in his tone made me wait. "I'm calling because I think you should know. Adam tried to kill himself last night. He's in the hospital. He's stable, but it was close. My entire body went numb. I'm not calling to make you feel guilty, David continued quickly. You had every right to do what you did. What he did to you was unforgivable. I just thought you should know that he's not doing well. The guilt finally caught up with. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the prosecutor's office, staring at nothing. Adam had tried to kill himself. Mom was falling apart. Their lives were in ruins, and I was the one who'd lit the match. Was this justice, or had I become as destructive as... I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the truth had consequences. For everyone, including me. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I stood in my new apartment in Portland, watching the rain streak down the windows. The view was nothing special, just a street lined with maple trees and a coffee shop on the corner. But it was mine, not shared with anyone, not tainted by memories of betrayal. Just mine. The move had been necessary. Seattle held too many ghosts. Every street corner a reminder of the life I'd thought I had, family I'd thought I knew. Portland offered something I desperately needed: anonymity. Here, I was just Paige, not the woman whose mother stole her husband, not the daughter who sent her own mother to jail, just Paige. Mom had pled guilty to avoid a trial. The prosecutor said it was the smart move. The evidence was overwhelming. She got 18 months with the possibility of early release for good behavior. She'd serve her time in a minimum security facility, and then she'd be released into a world where no one trusted her. I didn't visit, didn't write, didn't add money to her commissary account. Some people called me cruel for that. Distant relatives I barely knew sent messages saying I was punishing her too harshly, that she was still my mother, that family should forgive. But those people hadn't lived through what I lived. They hadn't felt the specific horror of discovering that the two people you loved most in the world had conspired against you for years. They hadn't paid for the hotel rooms where their mother betrayed them. So I ignored their messages and focused on rebuilding. Therapy helped. I found a good therapist in Portland, a woman named Dr. Reeves, who specialized in family trauma. She didn't try to force me toward forgiveness or tell me I needed closure through reconciliation. She just helped me process the grief, because that's what this was. Ultimately, I'd lost death, but to her own selfishness. The woman who raised me, who I'd thought I knew, she'd been a carefully constructed facade, hiding someone fundamentally broken, and grieving that loss was just as valid as grieving a death, maybe harder in some ways, because Mom was still alive, still in the world, still capable, but the loved, the one I'd thought would always be in my corner. She was gone, had probably never existed in the first place. Dr. Reeves helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for Mom's choices, that loving her hadn't been naive or stupid, that trust isn't a weakness, even when it's betrayed. She also helped me understand something else. I'd been looking for closure in the wrong place. I thought exposing them at the wedding, that watching their lives fall apart would heal the wound they'd created. And while there was satisfaction in seeing consequences finally catch up with them, it didn't actually make me whole again. That work, the work of becoming whole, was something only I could do. It took months. Lots of therapy, lots of journaling, lots of quiet nights sitting with uncomfortable feelings instead of running from them. Learning to trust my own judgment again, learning that being betrayed, broken, or unlovable. It meant the people who betrayed me were broken. That was their failure, not mine. And slowly, I started to heal. The marketing job I'd landed in Portland, better pay, more creative freedom, a team that actually valued my input. I threw myself into it, rebuilding my professional identity separate from everything that had happened. I made new friends, people who didn't know my history, who saw me as I was now instead of as a victim of circumstance. We'd meet for happy hour on Fridays, go hiking on weekends, live the normal life I'd thought I had before, but never really did. And then I met Ethan. It happened at the coffee shop below my apartment. I was working on my laptop, and he was at the next table, sketching in a notebook. We kept accidentally making eye contact, looking away, smiling. Finally, he came over and asked if the chair across from me was taken. We started talking. He was an architect, working on sustainable housing projects. He'd moved to Portland from Boston 2 years ago for the job opportunities and the better weather. He was kind. Not performing kindness to get something from me, but kind in that quiet, steady way that doesn't need recognition. We went on a first date, then a second, then a third. And somewhere around date 5, sitting in a restaurant overlooking the Willamette River, he asked me about my family. I'd been dreading this moment. The moment where I'd have to explain my history and watch him decide whether I was worth the baggage. I told him every affair, the betrayal, the wedding disaster, the fraud charges. All of it. I watched his face as I talked, looking for signs that this was too much, that he was already. Instead, he reached across the table and he told me he was sorry I'd gone through that what they'd done was unforgivable, that I'd been incredibly brave to stand up for myself the way I had. He didn't try to fix it or minimize, suggest I should forgive and move on. He just listened and validated and made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. That's when I knew I could trust him. Not because he was nobody is, but because what I saw was what I got. No hidden agendas, no secret betrayals waiting to be discovered, just a good man who treated me with respect and honesty. We'd been together for 4 months now, taking things slow, building something real. He'd met Haley, who'd given him her approval with a fierce hug and a whispered threat about what would happen if he ever hurt me. I hadn't told him I loved him yet. That word still felt dangerous, loaded with the potential for betrayal. But I felt something close to it, something warm and safe and promising. Maybe that would be enough for now. Haley kept me updated on the family news I no longer wanted to be part of. Mom was doing okay in prison, keeping her head down, working in the library. She'd written Haley a few times asking about me. Haley never responded. Adam had recovered from his suicide attempt and moved back to Montana. Last Haley heard, he was working construction and living in his brother's basement. His social media was deleted, his professional reputation destroyed. He'd essentially disappeared from the life he'd built. Part of me felt bad about that. Not guilty, exactly, but sad. Sad that it had come to this, that so many lives had been destroyed because two selfish people couldn't control themselves. But I also knew that consequences were necessary. That accountability was the only way to stop people like them from doing this to someone else. I'd done what needed to be done, and I was learning to live with that. On a rainy Tuesday, 6 months and 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, I received a letter in the mail. The return address was the prison where Mom was serving her sentence. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The letter was short. 3 paragraphs, handwritten on standard prison stationery. Mom said she'd had a lot of time to think, that she'd finally started to understand the depth of what she'd done, that she'd been in therapy, mandated by the prison, and was starting to see the patterns in her behavior, the way she'd used people her whole life. She said she didn't expect my forgiveness, that she knew she didn't deserve it, but she wanted me to know that she was sorry, deeply sorry for everything. She ended the letter with, "You were the best thing I ever did with my life, and I destroyed that. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I lost my daughter because I was too selfish to deserve. I hope you find real happiness." I read the letter, then I folded it carefully and put it in a box with all the other pieces of my old life. Photos of Mom and me before everything fell apart, cards she'd sent me over the years, the last birthday present she'd given me before the affair was revealed. I didn't throw the box away. But I didn't keep it out where I could see it. It lived in the back of my closet, a reminder that this had all been real, but also that it was in the past. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday, years from now, when the wounds weren't so fresh, I'd be able to have a conversation with her about what happened and why. But not now. Now I needed to focus on moving forward, not backward. Dr. Reeves asked me in our next session how I felt about the letter. I thought about it for a long time before answering. The truth was complicated. I was glad Mom was getting help, glad she was starting to take accountability, but her apology didn't change what she'd done. It didn't undo the pain or give me back the years of my life she'd stolen. It was just words on paper, and words weren't enough. What I needed, what I was slowly building, was a life where her betrayal where I was more than just the daughter whose mother slept with her husband. I was Paige, marketing professional, friend, girlfriend, survivor. I was someone who'd been knocked down harder than most people can imagine and had gotten back up anyway. Someone who'd faced the worst kind of betrayal and chosen truth over silence, accountability over enabling. I wasn't perfect. I still had bad days where the anger and hurt felt overwhelming, days where I questioned whether I'd done the right thing or gone too far. But more and more, I had good days. Days where I laughed with Ethan over dinner. Days where I felt proud of the work I was doing. Days where I looked in the mirror and liked the person That person, the woman I was stronger than the woman I'd been. Not because the betrayal had made me strong, but because I'd chosen to grow from it instead of letting it destroy. Last week, Ethan and I were walking through a farmer's market downtown when he stopped at a flower stand. He picked up a bouquet of sunflowers and handed them to me with a smile. Pride. Not from sadness, but from the simple, overwhelming realization that this was what love was supposed to look like. Uncomplicated, generous, safe. We went back to my apartment, and he helped me arrange the flowers in a vase. And as I watched him carefully trimming the stems, humming along to the music playing from my speaker, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. Not the absence of that was still there. Probably always would be to some degree, but peace with where I was. Peace with the choices I'd survived the worst thing I could imagine. Who'd betrayed me were facing consequences. The systems that had failed me, the workplace that had ignored Adam's harassment, the social circles that had enabled moms were being held, and I was free to build a life we loved, free to trust again. Carefully, but genuinely, free to be more than the pain that had been inflicted on me. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did at the wedding. If I think I went too far, if I should have handled it differently. My answer is always the same. No. I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret exposing. I don't regret refusing to be silent while they rewrote history. What Mom and Adam did was wrong. And sometimes the only way to stop wrong from spreading is to shine a light on it, no matter how uncomfortable that makes people. Would I do it again? A heartbeat. Because that moment, standing in that wedding venue in my red dress, refusing to let them get away with destroying, that was the moment I took my power back. Everything good that came after stemmed from that choice. The healing, the growth, the new life in Portland, Ethan, all of it. I'd gone through hell, but I'd come out the other side as someone I was proud to be, and that everything. As I write this, sitting in my Portland apartment with rain tapping against the windows and Ethan's jacket draped over my chair, I think about what I'd tell my past self. I'd tell her that the betrayal wasn't her fault, that loving people who didn't deserve it doesn't, it makes you. I'd tell her to trust her instinct, that when something feels wrong, and I'd tell her that survival isn't just about getting through it's about building something beautiful on the other side of it. I survived, and now I'm living, really living. Not just existing in the shadow of what was done to me, creating something. The woman who walked into that wedding to expose is still that fierce, protective energy that refuses to accept, but she's not all of me. I'm also the woman who laughs at Ethan's terrible jokes, who's building a career she's proud of, who's learning to trust again without losing herself whole. Not in spite of what happened, but because I chose to become whole. Not the consequences Mom and Adam, the public vindication, or the viral story. Justice system finally, the victor, happy. Living proof that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of something better. Before I go, I want to hear from you. You're reading this, wherever you are in the world, whatever city you're in right now, leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. It helps me remember that I'm not alone in this, that there are people everywhere who understand what it's like to survive betrayal and come out stronger. And if my story resonates, if it helped in any way, consider following this channel, because survival stories matter. Accountability matters. And your voice, your story, your experience, they matter too. Thank you for being here with me through all of this, for witnessing my journey from devastation to. I hope wherever you are, whatever you're going, you find your own path to peace. We all